Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 187th, count 'em, 187, Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We have a full boat as always, starting with 25 folks here, and it is a really, really heavy agenda today, but we're going to start with ANNA GYORGY. It's very important. Our organizers know that we need to celebrate our victories. And ANNA GYORGY was with us a few weeks ago talking about a big fight in Western Massachusetts, and they won. So, Anna, I'm going to go to you in a minute. SUSIE SHANNON is joining us, the great homeless advocate. We have the Walk the Walk group talking about with Seth Fleischer, and that's a tongue tire, Seth, and Emily to talk about their great group, Walk the Walk. Emily Levy will join us from Scrutineers. TATANKA BRICCA is going to talk to us about Leonard Peltier. And we do want to note the absolutely terrifying reality that there is now a fire at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, where there are count them, 6 reactors. God help us all. In the second hour, again, God help us all, we're going to discuss the plans of the Trump campaign. Again, we are nonpartisan, but we do need to discuss this existential reality of how the election can once again be taken away from a majority of the voters, as happened in 2016 most recently, but has happened a number of times before, including 2000, and turned over to the Trump campaign through the Electoral College. We're going to be joined by Greg Palast, Ray McClendon in Georgia, and Lucian Truscott, a very well-known writer dating back to the 70s from the Rolling Stone. So there you go, full boat, 2 hours, at least 220 if we go to 420. And here we are. Great to see everybody, starting with 32 people now. ANNA GYORGY, you are my I met you, of course, when you were a teenager, but my buddy from Western Mass. You've been on, you had the great Court Dorsey with us a few weeks ago to talk about your major fight in Western Massachusetts against a ridiculous battery storage facility. And ta-da, you won. Tell us about it.
Well, these victories, they're never over, but we have to celebrate them when they come, and as this massive corporate battery storage project locating in a very large community of woods and biodiversity, but very small in population, 920 people. Land was cheap, and the idea was to store electricity, which was from the grid, which is not solar, not wind. It's unnatural gas and some nuclear. They thought that land was cheap and there wouldn't be a problem. And we are not opposed to the concept of battery storage, but massive facilities with lithium-ion batteries, which can explode on contact with oxygen, among other things. We learned a lot, and it's been like a couple years, but especially one whole year since May last year that we've been on the case. And if you want to know more about it, because I know we don't have a lot of time, go to NAB United, www.NAB United, and we have our statement, which went out today, upon the cancellation of this project by the New Leaf Corporation. We have a lot of kind of new corporations that are profiting from cheap land in rural areas. And we really
you won.
Yeah. Well,
they should know by now.
Canceled on Hiroshima Day. I mean, it was an unbelievable day, August 6th, because we had a very moving, terrific program in the morning, and then in the afternoon came this news of cancellation, which we totally expected, but like later, we were already planning, getting ready for direct action. Oh, well, maybe another time.
Well, listen, as we say in the movement, Mazel Tov. I mean, they should know by now not to come into Western Massachusetts with large energy projects. As you know, the birth of the no nukes movement happened in the towns of Wendell and Montague and these other small rural communities in Western Massachusetts, about 90 miles north of 90 miles west of Boston,
Oh,
180.
great, here it is. Scroll
There it
down
is.
and you'll see the project.
So
Just-
there you go. You can, those of you on the radio can't see this, but
Oh,
it's a picture
this
of the
project,
site, the
Sluggo,
proposed site.
Sluggo, when we saw this project, this is from the builders of it. Yeah, that in the middle of the woods. So on the left here, you have pristine. Our area is part of the Amazon of New England, which means forest, unbroken forest areas starting from northern Connecticut up through Vermont. And it's precious resources. It's sequestering carbon. It's home to all kinds of, as one of our members calls it, non-voting residents. You know, when we saw that plan, it was Sluggo. It was just like when we saw what the twin nukes were supposed to look like on the Montague Plains. We just said, no way.
Right, right. Well, this recalls a visceral reaction we all had in December 1973, for God's sakes, when the Greenfield Recorder ran an aerial photograph of the Montague Plains, a very, very special ecological area, with the imposition of twin nuclear power plants. We all looked at it and said, no way that's going to happen. And that's where no nukes came from. And now, all these years later, you won again. Anna, Mazel Tov, congratulations to your great grassroots campaign. It's important to celebrate our victories, and here we have one. So thank you so much.
Our statement is now online. It just went out today to the press and friends. So if you go to nabunited.org, you can read our statement, and has a little about the history of it. Thank you for your inspiration and support. We really appreciate it.
All right. No nukes, Anna, and goodbye to those batteries. We'll put them somewhere else. I have a perfect spot for that battery facility. It'll go very, very well at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I think that's a great place for it. So,
well, if they're decentralized, that's another thing. But you know,
all right.
Watts.
And speaking of victories, we also have Vinnie DeStefano with us, who was part of the Julian Assange campaign. He's circulating a picture of Julian with his wife, Stella, otherwise known as Stella, and their two kids on the beach in Australia. Great work, Vinnie DeStefano. Can we get a quick report from TATANKA BRICCA on Leonard Peltier? Leonard, TATANKA, where do we stand on getting Leonard Peltier to be a free man?
Well, we've got to work like crazy. You can go to the link that Harvey sent out to Amnesty International. You can go to the Leonard Peltier Defense Fund. But one of the things I was thinking about is it would be really good to find people that are close to Biden to put pressure on him. And I think Chuck Schumer and he are fairly close. So if there's anybody on the call from PDA or, you know, that does anyway, if there's anyone that can put pressure through Schumer on Biden or do some research, anybody else is close to Biden to get him to, it's a perfect time, right? He's lame duck president. Time to do it.
Well, we hope to God that Leonard gets out before Kamala comes in, so that we can, you know, whatever. But pressure.
Then you can talk more about the odds of that. Like it's outside, but you know,
pressure needs to not stop. We cannot forget about Leonard Peltier. And again, celebrating a victory. Julian Assange is walking the beach with his family after all that hellish time. Vinny, do you want to say a quick word? And
yes, I do. We're going to have a victory celebration. It's important with so few victories in our quiver to celebrate them. In the weekend of September the 21st, there are going to be simultaneous celebrations in Berkeley, in DC, in Manhattan, possibly Denver, possibly Los Angeles, to celebrate this victory and to talk about the very things that TATANKA is talking about, freeing the remaining political prisoners, putting an end to the 1917 Espionage Act, and a long-term goal, because it'll take at least 5 years, probably more, to issue a pardon for Julian because he had to admit to the crime of journalism. And so there'll be more information coming. Harvey, you were invited to a meeting that we have on Thursday for the planning of those parties. I hope you can make it. If not, I will share it with you the next time we meet.
Well, share it with us next week on the Monday call again so that everybody knows. But yes, we need Leonard out, for God's sakes, 50 years in prison. We for nothing. We now have 50 people on the call for everything. So that's great.
And that is actually Julian and Stella behind me from many, many years ago because they discovered the Wayback Machine.
Great. Fantastic. So thank you so much, TATANKA and Vinnie. We have two guests, SUSIE Shannon and Seth Fletcher. Does either of you have to leave shortly? Because I'll give one of you a quick run in here. SUSIE Shannon talking about homelessness. Do you want to jump in, SUSIE? Seth and
Sure.
And Emily, do you have to go soon, or can you hear SUSIE Shannon on homelessness?
Yeah, I think we can follow. I think that's fine.
Thank you so much. SUSIE Shannon, you are
Sounds great.
You are a great hero to so many of us with your incredible work on homelessness. What can you, yeah, I understand you're gonna be at the Chicago convention. And Emily Levy is with us as well here. Emily, did you have to go at a certain time? Or can you hang with SUSIE Shannon? You're good. Okay, SUSIE, go ahead. I will caution you, I was at the Chicago Democratic National Convention in 1968, and the Chicago police beat the hell out of us, so be careful. All right, go ahead, please.
I was in Chicago in 1968 too, but I was in my crib while you guys were all fighting for my generation. So
I
thank
remember
you.
seeing you there, yeah. So I think I changed your diaper. So go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. So I'm SUSIE Shannon. I work on issues related to our unhoused community and also helping low-income renters who are in danger of falling into homelessness. And right now we are working on a rent control initiative in California, which is Proposition 33. I hope that everyone will support that. Currently, we have a ban on rent control here in California that basically states that for any building built after 1995, none of those tenants can have rent control. Single family homes, a lot of these places, the state actually is preventing our local communities from expanding rent control. A lot of you have likely seen a lot of homeless encampments throughout California, because we have over 188,000 people who are homeless now in our state. I started working with our unhoused community in 2005 when encampments were starting to grow and go into other areas. My family is also formerly homeless, and so I have lived experience as well. And I think what we're seeing now is just a real nightmare. Housing costs are continuing to skyrocket to the point where we have more people who are rent burdened in the state of California than anywhere in the entire country. Our progressive state in California has more people rent burdened here than anywhere. A lot of folks know, particularly for seniors on a fixed income, or your Starbucks barista, or people who work at Target or Home Depot, very hard for them to afford rent when their salary for the month is typically the cost of rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. And Bernie Sanders actually put out yesterday this great map that showed where in the United States you could afford a 2-bedroom apartment if you are working full-time, making minimum wage. And the answer there was 0. There's no place in the United States now, no state, where you can work full-time at a minimum wage job and still be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And so, of course, a waitress with 2 kids is not going to be able to afford the new apartments that are going up. And so, we want to stop this as much as we can and make sure that our rents are affordable. I've worked for many, many years getting people help to get off the streets. And, you know, you're not going to be able to help somebody get into a luxury apartment that's $3,000 a month. So this is, you know, very reasonable. Obviously, we're getting attacked by corporate landlords just every day. They are actually going to be doing a webinar soon, trying to tell tenants what's in their best interest when they have been price gouging and going after tenants for years. These are, you know, very large corporations that make billions of dollars off of tenants, and whose CEOs are pretty much MAGA Republicans who give a lot of money to Trump. And they basically just want to price gouge and price fix. So this year was the first time, thanks to President Biden, that in a State of the Union speech by a sitting president, there was actually a mention about corporate landlords and price fixing, and the plight of tenants in the context of what's going on. And then Biden actually followed up by having the Justice Department raid one of the corporate landlord headquarters in Atlanta because they were price fixing. And so all of these neighborhoods are becoming unaffordable. There's a lot of gentrification. People are getting displaced from their neighborhoods. And then in a lot of cases, they're becoming homeless. And so really just voting yes on 33 is a great way in California to help tenants. And it's like one of the best ways to help them. And then as an added bonus, corporate landlords also put Prop 34 on the ballot, which actually would prevent the leading organization, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, from putting any subsequent initiatives on the ballot to help renters. So we want to defeat that. So we're a yes on 33 and a no on 34. I'm very excited, I have to say, about this administration around the issues of rent control. I'm the chair of the DNC Poverty Council, and so we're going to have 2 meetings next week on Tuesday and Thursday where we're going to talk about housing, we're going to talk about rent control, because the two really go hand in hand, also with stemming the tide of increasing homelessness. And so we have wonderful panelists. If you are going to be in Chicago, we'll be at the McCormick Place on Tuesday and Thursday from 1:45 to 3:15. There's a very awful movement going on right now to criminalize people who are homeless. When I first started in 2005, that was kind of the norm, basically in LA, which is the homeless capital of the United States, but also a growing movement across the United States, which was basically to say that anyone who is not able to find a place to live still cannot sit, sleep, or lie on the sidewalk. Obviously, that's a problem, particularly for LA, where there's half the shelter space for the number of people who are unhoused. But across the country now, because of a recent Supreme Court decision, a lot of Democrats, even, you know, Republicans and Democrats, like our Governor Gavin Newsom, are moving to criminalize people who are homeless because somehow they think throwing folks in jail is a better way to address this issue than housing. We all know housing is the only way to end homelessness. What a lot of our elected officials are doing right now are rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And the ship is still going to go down. It's not going to matter if you move people from neighborhood to neighborhood or throw them in jail for a couple of days, and then folks are out again and still trying to look for a place to live. The only answer really is housing. And this may shock a lot of folks on this call, particularly if you live in Los Angeles, but we have over 70,000 vacant units in Los Angeles. We literally have encampments in the shadows of completely vacant buildings in downtown Los Angeles. So we have the answer. We just need elected officials and leaders who understand that, by utilizing adaptive reuse and converting some of these buildings, which could easily be used and are being used in some instances to house our unhoused community, and by building, supportive housing, we're actually able to tackle this problem. And so one of the things I want to give a huge shout out to Congresswoman Maxine Waters, because she has been in a lot of ways leading the charge here. But she's had her Ending Homelessness Act, which was reintroduced for this legislative session, which would make Section 8 vouchers an entitlement program, which basically means that if you're eligible for a Section 8 voucher, you get a Section 8 voucher. And that would go a really long way in terms of addressing homelessness. A lot of people say it's a complicated issue. It is a complicated issue, but if somebody is unhoused and you give them a home, you give them an apartment, and I have done this many, many times over with my clients, they are no longer unhoused. They can get stabilized. They can go see a doctor or a dentist and not have to leave their things out on the sidewalk or in their car. And so basically all I'm saying is that all these things are connected. We need to pass Prop 33. We need to give our local communities the power to expand rent control. We need to make sure we're building permanent supportive housing. A lot of times you'll hear people say, we need to build more housing. Well, not all housing is created equal. And a lot of times what they're talking about is housing that's luxury housing. And that's, for people who make close to or over $100,000 a year, right? They're not talking about very low income people, low income folks. They're not talking about seniors on a fixed income. They're mainly talking about things that profit corporate landlords. So I'm just going to give one more pitch for yes on 33, no on Prop 34 on your November ballot, which will be the same ballot that the presidential election is on. And then if it's okay, I just want to mention too that on July 4th, I was at the White House and I was with my friend who is Native American. She's Iroquois. And she did ask the president about Leonard Peltier and a pardon. And he said he was working on it. So I hope that gives a little bit of hope to folks that, I was actually next to her when she asked President Biden about Leonard Peltier.
Wow, fantastic. So listen, little housekeeping. Emily and Seth, and also Emily Levy, what I want to do is give the whole half hour, starting at the bottom of the hour here, for your issues. Are you good with that? We'll get Susie until the 30 minutes after. Emily Levy, are you good with that? And then the whole half hour from 2:30 to 3 California time will be devoted to your issues. Is that good? You're good with that? Okay. And I see Greg Pallas has joined us. Greg is going to lead us off at 6 o'clock Pacific time on the exploration of election theft and where we're going to go. We're going to be joined then by Ray McClendon from Georgia and Lucian Truscott from Rolling Stone. Greg, are you good to start as we discussed it at 6 o'clock Eastern time? We're going to give that whole hour to you and the issues of election theft and your great movie, Vigilantes. Okay? And I love your hat there. I assume you're in Portugal. You're
Yes.
muted. Yeah, you're good? Great. Thank you, Greg Pallas. Great to have you with us, bro. And we have 62 people with us. We've got 4 hands here: Mike Hirsch, Carla Sand, Wendy Lederman, and Alex Williams. So go ahead, Mike. We'll go to the bottom of the hour, another 6 minutes, please. Mike?
Susie, great to see you, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing. You're an amazing leader, and you're making a huge difference for people in this country. I just have a few quick points to make. One is we need to repeal what is the Faircloth Amendment,
Right.
which inhibits the federal government from really doing anything meaningful to get at the housing crisis, which was largely caused by the federal government when Reagan was in charge and basically launched a war on the poor. So it's the Faircloth Amendment is one thing. We need to get rid of that. Another thing is we have to go after local zoning, which unfortunately prioritizes single-family homes. The bigger, the more expensive, the better, because they're largely captured by developers. And I just want to remind people, even though we're not a partisan Zoom, this is a nonpartisan Zoom, there's a candidate running for president who was a real estate developer. Not a really good one from what I understand, but he focused on upscale, high-price housing, and he and his father have a heritage of screwing over people. And so we've got really a slumlord running for president, and it's important to keep that in mind. And the last point that I want to make is that, Susie, like you said, not all housing is created equal. There'll be projects that are approved with a set aside of maybe 15% so-called affordable housing. I always ask affordable for whom, because that's a real question. And the other thing is, if there's a penalty that they can pay and not have any affordable housing whatsoever, they just don't provide it. And then they have the sneaky move where if there's any modest income or poor people in the housing, everybody else uses pressure to get them out. So it's a difficult, intertwined kind of problem, but it can be solved through policy decisions if we follow your lead and just be humane as a nation, as a society, and
Right.
care about people and not just walk by unhoused people. And then, as I told Donald Whitehead, and I try to remind everybody about this, I think that unhoused people, it's not a bug in the system, it's a feature, and it's designed to scare middle-class people into shutting their mouths and going along with the program. Because the threat is, if you lose your job, so many people live paycheck to paycheck. If you lose your job, you're going to be out on the street. What are your thoughts about what I said?
Well, yes, on the Faircloth Amendment. So there was a time, it's so funny because when you look at rent control, that went back to 1919. And when you look at public housing, that went back to World War II, right? And these are programs that just work. Public housing actually worked. It got a really bad rap, I think, in the 70s and then in the 80s. And then they started getting rid of it for a voucher system where people had to go to private landlords and kind of beg them to take them and to take the Section 8 vouchers. And then there was project-based Section 8, which is a whole building where every unit is Section 8. But our most stable housing has always been public housing. And that's, built by the government, and it used to be run by the government as well. And now they have like private management companies. But that is the most stable type of housing that we can have. And right now we're just preventing that from being developed, even though in the 1990s with the Hope 6 programs that Clinton had put in place, and we lost hundreds of thousands of units of public housing. There was a promise to rebuild that housing, and we're seeing that that's not happening. So that's one of the things that we're going to address in Chicago, because this is happening like right now in Chicago, where they promised to put in public housing or rebuild public housing. They are instead putting in like tennis clubs, and there was a billionaire who is like renting a lot of that property for soccer training fields for his soccer team. And so there's a lot of stuff going on where people are unhoused. They're living in substandard conditions. We need more housing, but what we need really is affordable housing, and we also need public housing. And so we're going to talk about that next week at the Poverty Council.
Please put up, I assume that'll be Zoom, but put it up, the link if you can on the chat. We got 3 questions, and then we're gonna, this is a great session. Thank you for that. Carla, Wendy, and Alex. Carla Sand, go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Carla Sand in Minnesota, and I am on an all elders entire state of Minnesota program. and we're working on housing. So we know all of the problems, we think. I mean, we've been over and over and over, and Mike hit most of them, and you've hit most of them. But what we're looking for are solutions. And we see rent control and homelessness issues as just a small part of the housing problem. It's the policy from the federal government that we need to change. We need a housing policy, or human rights policy on housing, but we also need to hit the hard issue. And I'm wondering if you're doing any of this on the density issue. That's a very controversial issue, and we need to address it because cities and landlords are really after us on that. And of course, we need money from the feds. That's the big problem, and we need it now. So I'm hoping you're working on some of those issues other than just homeless or rent control.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yep. We're working a very comprehensive list of bills and programs that we're hoping we could get at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Carla. Okay, we're just a little bit over. We'll go through, and then Susie, this is great. Wendy Lederman, and then Alex Williams, and then we'll move on. Wendy?
Hi, thank you so much. I was excited you'd be here. I'm one of the co-conveners on here, and we had I really appreciate this work because it's really close to me. I'm with you where I've also experienced it. Luckily, I wasn't actually on the street, but I was transient and homeless for like a year and a half after I lost plumbing in my bathroom during COVID, and I was actually evicted and sued for complaining about that. And that's my point, is that like a lot of this is preventable. You know, when they want the land, they want to gentrify it. You can't afford to buy your own judge. There's not a lot of legal representation for you. And it just is like this easy domino where it's like one wrong thing goes on, even if you've acted completely in good faith, like it's a whole avalanche. And then it becomes like a taboo within society. Like Fort Lauderdale, Food Not Bombs workers were arrested a few years ago for feeding homeless people. And now DeSantis just passed that same law with no sleeping in public, which I'm afraid for like people with diabetes, and they might have to take a nap. You know what I mean? Some people, it's a health issue. So a lot of this is actually like civil rights. And in my whole path, my whole journey, I've encountered many situations. Like even when I was fighting the eviction, it was a Zoom hearing and it wasn't recorded. And so it was a circus. I actually filmed it and put it on YouTube. But you get this thing in society where we lose the value of other human beings. So it just becomes less of a priority as a society in general, when people don't realize that the same forces that have them struggling to cover their own bills are the same things that caused whatever effect that they're seeing. And so basically what happens is people end up in more vulnerable situations because they don't have that same dignity. They don't have those same civil rights. And then you end up in situations where even now I'm dealing in a very discriminatory, because it's the civil rights I'm looking at it as like the war on the poor. I've been saying that for years, because it's like, I think that your financial situation should also be something that's included against how you can be discriminated against. So anyway, all these things are preventable, and it starts with just having basic value as a society. I know I'm all over the place, but again, it's really
thank you.
important to me, and I hope we can hook you up with Donald Whitehead, and we'll have you back again and continue the discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Wendy. Very good. Appreciate it. Alex Williams, and then we're going to go to Seth and Emily Levy. Alex, go ahead. You're the last on homelessness. Thank you. Thank you again for that, Wendy. Much appreciated. Alex Williams, I got to unmute you here. It's always a challenge. We got 65 people with us, Susie. You're a big hit. Come on. Yeah, this is the worst part of the call, is getting people unmuted. As we try to unmute Alex, do you want to wrap up, Susie, and give us a final direction? You said two ballot initiatives in California. What about nationwide? What can people most importantly do for you? I think we've lost our caller here, Alex. Go ahead, Susie.
Well, I think nationwide, the Biden administration has called for a 5% rent cap. and also to end price fixing through the RealPage platform. That was a platform, that's a platform that's actually currently in use by corporate landlords to fix prices in the area, to make all of the prices on rental units go up at the same time. It's really it's really awful. It's obviously leading to gentrification and people being displaced from their neighborhoods. I think supporting Maxine Waters out of homelessness legislation is really important. Promoting and supporting yes on Proposition 33 and no on Proposition 34. 34 is designed to stop any type of initiative to have a rent control initiative on the ballot. So yes on 33, no on 34.
Okay, thank you. Alex Williams, real quickly, and then we're going to go to Seth and Emily, and then Emily Levy. Alex, go ahead, please. You're the last on homelessness.
I just want to say I can't say enough how grateful I am for you and what you're doing. I too have been homeless. This goes to I'm in Washington D.C. area, and it's pathetic how we just don't build houses.
Yeah,
I mean, just do that.
Well, as Susie says, affordable houses.
Affordable houses. Oh, there's an article in LA Progressive about that.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. And I'm glad you've got a home now. And Susie, again, you're a great hero. Thank you so much. And keep coming back and be careful in Chicago. I've heard talk of they're putting LSD in the water supply. So be careful about that. Otherwise, thank you for being with us and keep us posted. Give us, when you go after Chicago, you'll come back and give us a report along with Mike Hirsch. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Seth, take care. Thank you, No Nukes, and good. Let's get housing. Okay, Seth and Emily, you'll be followed by Emily Levy. Seth and Emily, you're with Walk the Walk. You were here first. And thank you for your patience and sticking with us. We're going to go to the top of the hour now. Will you please tell us about Walk the Walk, what you do, and how you're approaching this election? MYLA RESON wanted to say a word about you before.
Yeah, you asked me to introduce Seth and Emily. I saw you on July 30th with your interview with Sam Cedar on the Majority Report, and I was so impressed. Part of the reason that I wanted to have you on was because your work seems to dovetail with a lot of what we focus on this grassroots election protection call. And I'm hoping, I know you've been sticking with this Zoom for a while, and I had thought that it would be really wonderful for you to meet Ray McClendon, who does this kind of organizational, relational organizing in BIPOC communities. He's going to be on during the next hour, at the beginning of the next hour. So if you can stick around to meet Ray, if you haven't met him already, that would be fabulous. And yes, please tell us all about Walk the Walk.
Thanks so much. Thanks to all of you for inviting us. Really, really appreciate it.
And you'll also interface with Emily Levy, who's waiting by and who does a lot of great work on these issues too. So go ahead, please.
Fantastic. If it's okay, we're going to share a handful of slides.
Okay, but remember that we have a radio audience.
Yep, it'll still be totally intelligible for people on the radio too.
Okay, thank you.
Even more helpful for people here. So we are we're Walk the Walk USA. Emily and I are the founders. We're an all-volunteer national network of donor activists, and what we do is we work on democracy preservation. The thing I want to stress is that it's not our day job, and it hasn't been our day job for the 6 years we've been doing this. I'd call it a story of accidental activism. So it started the morning we woke up, the day after the election, 2016. Just like so many people, shell-shocked, and tried to explain to our two boys at the time what had just happened and asked ourselves how it was that we hadn't done more. We're data nerds with research backgrounds. Emily's a psychiatrist. I run a nonprofit that does applied research into sustainable finance and trains people on how to have impact with capital. And the more we researched, the more we realized that traditional forms of political investment are not that effective. And we wanted to find more productive ways to invest our own very limited political dollars. And that was sort of the genesis.
So we're just going to quick go through kind of what we have built with Walk the Walk, and sort of hopefully with an eye to helping others think about how they might also think about their political investments in this cycle. So our strategy from the very beginning has been based on three main principles, with a sort of a single unified investment portfolio. We think about it for democracy preservation. In a nutshell, what we focus on is supporting voters rather than candidates. So we came to the work trying to figure out how we, with finite financial resources, could really make a difference. And I think as probably all of you on this call are probably aware, probably preaching to the choir here, but we know that billions of dollars literally are spent in US elections. And what we learned is that most of that money is completely wasted. It's going to candidates who aren't going to win, no matter how much you give them, candidates who aren't going to lose, no matter how much, or candidates who are just completely overfunded and can't spend all of the money that they have. And most of that money, moreover, goes to strategies that don't work, TV ads that don't go to the right voters, or robocalls that no one picks up. We wanted to figure out how to make strategic political investments that have an impact. So three main things. To be strategic, we need to think, first of all, geographically. Again, as I'm sure you all know, because of the Electoral College, electoral map, some voters in swing states like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin carry more impact than others. Moreover, in certain regions of those swing states, there are places where there are important down ballot races, like for the House, state legislatures. So we focus geographically on not just the states, but specific regions within those states where voters can impact multiple critical races up and down the ballot. So often that might mean like we're not focusing on a deep blue urban area like Milwaukee, but instead we're supporting work in Wisconsin in Trempealeau County, US House District 3, for example. So next, having figured out some geographies, we focus on identifying and supporting voters who have been systematically excluded from typical political interventions, with a specific goal of expanding the electorate and specifically focusing on more young voters and voters of color. And then finally, the most effective voter engagement tactics, especially in presidential years, tend to be the ones that are the most underfunded. So we use research to identify and support relational organizing, which has been shown to be the most effective intervention in the places where that type of work can have the most benefit. And I know this group obviously is already very aware of the importance and effectiveness of grassroots organizing, which is also central to our efforts. So we built this organization because we believed in the power of research and community. We had an initial goal back in around 2019, 2020 of raising $200,000. Since then, we've actually far surpassed that. We've moved more than $11 million. We have a network of over 9,000 supporters. It's all volunteer run, and we are still aware that it's just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the billions that are wasted on primetime TV ads every year, but the difference is that our approach actually works. So Seth is going to explain a little bit more about how we're looking at this in 2024.
Yeah, so we're excited about Kamala Harris. We do not support her financially. We focus not on any single race, but on democracy preservation writ large. And so there are obviously there's a presidential election. There are 7 essential races in the Senate, 60 plus in the House, and there are 20 state legislative chambers and that are going to be critical this election cycle for democracy preservation. We can lose the presidency and still win many of these other key races. The presidency and the Senate tend to be highly correlated. So our personal feeling is that the US House is going to be the single best bulwark against fascism in the short term, and state legislatures as well. So just in terms of these 3 pillars. So the first one, as Emily mentioned, is geographic strategy. So we're continuing to focus on what Emily described, which we call geographic pressure points. So the idea is if you can home in on particular sub-regions within a state where a single voter will have outsized impact in a series of different nested races from the bottom of the ballot all the way to the top, you exponentially increase your political leverage. So the states that we're focusing on are the 7 battleground states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, which is our best shot at a flip. We added Montana and Ohio, the states with the most endangered incumbent senators. And then we added California and New York, which are likely to single-handedly be the states that determine control of the US House next year. So essentially what we do is for the geography criterion, we look for amazing grassroots organizations that are working not just within these states, but in the specific competitive districts or regions of those states where a single voter is going to have the chance to impact multiple crucial races that are key to democracy preservation. And then to get even more precise, almost every state where we're working has really major state legislative opportunities and threats. So we saw incredible wins in state legislatures in 2022. The margins remain razor thin still. And so one of our goals is really to identify the voters who can have an impact in as many of these races as possible, make sure that they understand the importance of their vote and help equip them with everything they need in order to exercise that right.
Okay, so that's the geographic pillar that we focus on and the nested race strategy. And then having identified those geographic areas, we next identify the most impactful voters to try to reach in those regions. So for those of you who are not able to see the slides now, I'll just describe what we're looking at here. So you can look at studies from 2020 of voters and non-voters. And for those of you who can see the slide, the pie chart that we're showing here, the chart on the left shows 2020 voters. And what you can see is that 28% of 2020 voters were non-white. Then there's another graph on the right that shows non-voters. Now, if race did not affect voting behavior, you would expect that 28% of non-voters would also be non-white. But instead, what you see is that 45% of non-voters are non-white. That is a very disproportionate figure.
With non-white, do you include Hispanic?
Yes.
Okay, and if you can go ahead and wrap in a minute or two, that would be great, because I want to integrate you with Emily Levy.
Sure.
Please.
And so what we know based on voting patterns, we can estimate that an enormous portion of those non-white eligible voters who did not cast votes would have turned out for Democrats. And so reducing that number is, purely mathematical, is the key to Democratic victory, expanding the electorate so that those historically—
And we are nonpartisan, but you're allowed to say that, so go ahead.
We're not. So finally then, so to turn out voters, again, for those of you who can see the slide, but I can explain it easily for those of you who can't see it, there's good research to show that the single most effective thing you can do, especially in presidential election years and especially for voters of color, is to focus on relational organizing. And let's talk a little bit about why that is and what that is. So relational organizing, what it means basically is groups that are embedded in a community working with folks from that community. And there's really 4 reasons that have been studied that show why this is so effective. It's relevant. We believe things, we listen to things that our friends tell us as opposed to TV ads or robocalls. We have more trust. Third, social norms. When people around us start talking about voting, it makes us think that everybody's voting. It encourages us to do the same. And kind of the flip side of that too, social pressure. We want to do the things that the people in our community are doing. This is especially true in communities of color who have good reasons to feel that the usual strategies don't take their needs into consideration. So Walk the Walk, basically what we do, we methodically vet and partner with effective grassroots groups using relational strategies in those crucial geographies that Seth talked about, groups that are working with and run by people of color, Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous populations that are the base of our party.
And then what we've done is we put together an investment portfolio for democracy preservation. So we work with a number of different trusted advisors like Movement Voter Project, Rural Democracy Initiative, a number of state donor tables. And then we have four key criteria for how we select groups. So they're groups that are, first of all, focused on engaging and electorally empowering communities of color, and they're led or co-led by those same communities. They are, secondly, using the most effective tactics. So those are person-to-person relational organizing and deep canvassing trusted messenger techniques. And then they're working in the particular US House and state legislative districts within these states that are going to be most competitive. So they're working from the bottom up. And they're underfunded, and they may not raise the necessary funds without our intervention. And then we make grants to this group. And so it's essentially we're a clearinghouse for single investments, people who want to make investments to preserve democracy.
Unbelievable. It's fantastic. You need to stay on to meet Ray McClendon and Andrea Miller, also from Center for Common Ground, these two groups, we've been talking for the last 4 years about what they do, and it really segues in with what you do. I want to bring in now Emily Levy. You'll stay with us, Seth and Emily, please. And then in the second hour, we're going to want to integrate you also with Greg Palast and Lucian Truscott, if you can.
Or yeah, I was
Emily,
just gonna say we have a hard stop at 3, unfortunately, but we'll
Our
look forward.
day jobs.
we'll have you back, but at any rate, hopefully Ray will come on soon. He was on earlier. Emily Levy, Wendy, did you get the intro material for Emily Levy? Wendy Lederman?
Yeah, I believe I have the correct stuff
Okay.
from your email. So
Go ahead. If you'll introduce Emily, that would be great, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm juggling a bunch of stuff here. How about I just off the top of my head, because I know Emily and I've worked with her and she's fabulous and we love her. She's a longtime progressive activist in the election community. Actually, in reading, I didn't realize that she was even old enough to be doing this as long as she has been doing it. She specializes in doing the poll tapes and recording poll counts after elections, but also training people on how to oversee and become poll workers and just basic observation of the election process and reinstating faith and participation for more voter engagement. So her group is Scrutineers. I suggest everybody join and follow along with her excellent work. Thank you so much. I hope I did you justice.
Emily, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Sligo.
Okay, Emily, go ahead, please.
I'm glad to be with you all of you here today. And Harvey asked me specifically to talk about recruiting poll workers, which is not one of the main things that we do, but I want to touch on it because that was kind of how our conversation started about me being on today. He responded to an email about National Poll Worker Recruitment Day, which was, I think, last week. And what I want to say is poll workers are still needed all over the country. So many people who have been poll workers in the past have not continued either because of, could you take that down? I'd rather be able to see people than a slide of our website. Thank you. That was a little glimpse of our website though. A lot of poll workers have not continued either because of COVID risk or because of fear based on or in response to the threats that have been happening to poll workers around the country. There's an organization called Power the Polls, which is helping to recruit poll workers all around the country and make sure they've got what they need to do it, answering their questions, helping identify the communities that are most in need of poll workers, and we're partnering with them. So if you are interested in becoming a poll worker, I'm going to put a link in the chat, but it's powerthepolls.org/scrutineers. So I encourage you to check that out. And what they will do, they don't hire poll workers. Poll workers would be hired by the local jurisdictions that need them. But Power the Polls can help you get in contact with the right place and provide supplementary material. And then the other thing that Scrutineers will be doing is probably in September, leading an information session for poll workers to help folks who are going to be working the polls learn how they can use that point of view that they have to do some election protection work at the same time. So I know they're really busy and it sounds funny to ask you to do things at the same time, but it will be things like what sort of problems you might encounter as a poll worker that could be indications that there are problems with the security of the election and what to do if you see those things. So we don't provide the training that local governments provide for poll workers. I want to be really clear that we're not in any way in competition with that, but we give some supplementary material to help you as a poll worker be more equipped for some of the problems that might occur that you probably won't be told about in your regular training. Harvey, you look like you're trying to say something.
No. Go, please.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to say that, and then I want to talk a little bit about what the other projects are that we're doing at Scrutineers. But first, I just want to say a little bit about the organization because we're kind of an unusual organization. We are all online. Everything we do, we teach people how to do things that they do in person, but our presence is all online, and we're a community. So we're national, we're nonpartisan, and in addition to that site that you just had a glimpse of, we have an interactive membership site that's sort of like a mini social media site where people can make posts and respond to each other, and we post our events, we post all kinds of articles, and the recordings of our past training sessions are there. We have a library of recordings and interviews we've done and things like that. And so we really encourage people to come there to learn and connect with each other and then take action together. We're very focused on teaching people how to take action to make the elections in your community and beyond more secure and more transparent. And I've recently learned that when we say transparent elections, people have really different ideas about what that means. So I want to say what I mean by it, which is elections where we can see what's going on enough to know that the winners really won and the losers really lost. And as many of you here know, but I don't know if everyone does or everyone listening on the radio does, we have a very non-transparent election system in the United States. Nearly all votes are counted inside computers. We can't tell what the software is doing. We have situations that are extremely dire, like the one in Georgia, where MAGA operatives actually stole, with local election officials' permission, the software that runs the entire state's election computers. And that was a few years ago, and they shared it online, and so it's been in the hands of people who could very easily use it to manipulate the outcome of Georgia's elections. And Georgia, the Georgia Secretary of State has refused to do anything about it. There's now an action. I want to just mention a call to action from our colleagues at the Coalition for Good Governance in Georgia. Georgia actually has the provision in its laws for an emergency paper ballot voting system, and that really needs to be enacted this year. The state election board is taking up that question next week. So we're asking people to write to the state election board and in support of using emergency paper ballots, hand-marked paper ballots this year for the Georgia election. If you join our email list or join our community at scrutineers.org, our newsletter is going out tomorrow, and it will have all the addresses and a little template email that you could send. So that's just sort of a quick call to action. Other projects that we're involved in are—
Emily, I hate to break in, but I have to go in a few minutes, and Sluggo promised me I could give a quick shout out to a big conference that PDA is having both in Chicago and online. And Bernie Sanders is going to be there. SUSIE Shannon, who we just heard from, is going to be there. We're going to have about a dozen members of Congress and twice that many top progressive organizers. And I'm going to drop the link into the chat right now. If you can join us in Chicago, that would be absolutely great. We're going to be at the Chicago Teachers Union, just a few blocks from the Democratic Convention. If you can't make it to Chicago, we understand. We ask for a small donation to help pay for all of our video that we're going to have going on and everything else that's happening. And then we'll have a live stream that you can sign up for. So, Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're doing a great job as always. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. And walk the walk. I am just so happy that you're doing what you're doing. You're singing our favorite song, and more power to you. You're absolutely amazing. And I look forward to working with both of you and your entire network moving forward, because we're doing the same things that you're doing, and you're absolutely wonderful. So again, check the chat. If you're listening on radio, you can go to, let's see, Progressive Central 2024.com. All one word, progressivecentral2024.com. And don't forget to like and share this video so we can increase our audience and get the word out. And thank you again, everybody. I got to go.
Thank you, Mike. I know you got to go, and Seth and Emily have to go. Emily, your presentation is great. I want to mention that we have both Greg Palast and Ray McClendon. And Emily, you've mentioned Georgia. We're going to go there. Ray McClendon And Greg, you both need to be in touch with Seth and Emily from Walk the Walk. Ray, they support exactly the kind of organizing you're doing. Seth and Emily, Ray is with Communities United for Democracy, for Justice in Atlanta, Georgia. So please exchange your contacts now. And also, if you'll both come back next week, we will continue this. And Emily, you're invited to come back next week as well. Emily, is there anything you want to close with before we go to Greg Palast and then Ray McClendon,
please.
Georgia?
Okay, thank you. So you can find us at scrutineers.org. I didn't get a chance to talk about the projects we're doing, but I will say in this newsletter that's going out tomorrow, there's also going to be an article about how you can help, even if you're primarily working with a campaign or doing get out the vote work and voter registration before the election. There's still some ways that you can help on the election security end. We are also sorely in need of donations and would appreciate your support. We accept crypto, stock, online donations, checks, etc. And find out about us more at scrutineers.org. Thanks again for having me.
Okay, so come back next week. We'll invite Emily and Seth to come back next week, and we'll go deeper into both of what you both do. And thank you so much, Emily, for your presentation. We have 68 people with us, and we're going to Greg Palast now, and then to Ray McClendon. We'll also be joined by Lucian Truscott at some point. But Greg, you have a film now on the horror show in Georgia, and we're going to talk about what Team Trump has in store for the election process, and then we'll go to Ray McClendon, who's your brother in arms here. So go ahead, and thank you again, both Emily's and Seth, for being with us. We'll see you next week. Go ahead, Greg, please.
Okay, this is Greg Palast. I've been working on these issues for 20 years. 24 years, actually, since 2000. I am putting out a film narrated by Rosario Dawson, produced by Martin Sheen, George DiCaprio. And it's called Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen. What this is about is the newest, most vicious, racist new attack on voters that we've seen in years. Specifically, for the first time in American history, we have a mass attack on voters, challenges to voters' right to vote by individual citizens. This is not government. This is not state operations. The film I'm making, which will be out September 6th, and it will be available free online beginning September 13th. Okay. What's happened is that it started out in Georgia, as most vote suppression tactics always start out in Georgia. That's where the GOP does their test drive. And I'm not being partisan about it. I'm a journalist. I'm not partisan. But it's only the GOP has been doing this. 88 GOP officials challenged 180,000 voters' right to vote. Now, this is not the state of Georgia, which I've done a lot of films and work on shenanigans in Georgia. This is not the state of Georgia challenging people. Under Georgia law, any voter can challenge any other voter in their county and say that voter shouldn't be allowed to vote. And the Georgia law, SB 202, says that any voter can challenge, quote, an unlimited number, end quote, of voters. And believe me, when I say unlimited, I mean unlimited. There's one GOP operative who works with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, named Pam Reardon. She personally challenged, are you ready for this? She challenged 32,000 voters in Cobb County, Georgia. Now, I would like to remind you that Joe Biden won the state by less than 12,000 votes. She challenged 32,000 voters. We were able to block that through our work with Black Voters Matter Fund, NAACP, Rainbow Push, etc. We were able to block them both in court and in the public. Now, however, the law was changed this year to make it harder for us to challenge the challengers. It also includes one guy named Alton Russell, a GOP vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. He challenged 4,000 voters. Almost all of them were Black soldiers out of Fort Benning, Georgia, who were assigned to other places in the states. 4,000 voters, including Major Gamaliel Turner, who's in our film. His vote was challenged because he was assigned to California by the president, right? Because of the war in Ukraine. He's the Pentagon's expert on warfare of the future. His vote was challenged, but he challenged the challengers. For him to get his vote back, he literally had to fly back to Georgia. That's a 5,000-mile round trip that he had to pay for. He brought in an attorney, Mark Elias, the big voting rights attorney from Washington, D.C. His ballot got counted because he went to court, spent unbelievable time and thousands of dollars to get his vote counted. But 4,000 other Black soldiers lost their vote. This is the issue. I know you talk about things like computers and crap like that. That's bullshit. I'm going to tell you that right now. Georgia's all paper ballots, by the way. And the real issue, and I'm not talking, I'm talking to a lot of white people here, and I'm going to be very blunt about it. The real issue is suppression of the vote of non-white people. And that's done by massive purges of the voter rolls. And it's also done by this new vigilante voter attack. And here's the danger. Many of you have seen, I hope you've seen, you should actually watch it, the film 2,000 Mules, which was launched by Donald Trump out of Mar-a-Lago. This film has been seen by tens of millions of people who are convinced now from this film that Black people are stuffing extra ballots into drop boxes. Now, drop boxes are not a minor thing. It's a major way that the minority community votes. Okay? Now, in Georgia, they were claiming that thousands of Black men, they were very explicit about it, have been stuffing drop boxes with forged ballots. And because of this, drop boxes have been shuttered in at least 20 states, almost eliminated. For example, in Georgia, they have reduced the number of drop boxes by state law. SB 202 reduced the number of drop boxes by state law in Atlanta by 75%. But they've increased the number of drop boxes by law in white counties. This is what's going on in America. This hysteria about non-white voters committing massive voter fraud. That's the real issue here. Screw this stuff about computers and paper ballots and all that. That's not what's happening. And I want to talk to you white people because I work with the NAACP, the Black Voters Matter Fund, Rainbow Push, and a New Georgia Project. Forget this stuff about computers. We have to talk about the fact that Black people are being removed, Asian American voters are being removed, Hispanic American voters are removed, and a very important group, the American Native voters, are under attack. They're being purged from the voter rolls. For example, in our film, you'll see in our film Vigilante, which, by the way, you can get at gregpalast.com starting September 13th.
Greg, let me jump in real quick. Lucian Truscott is with us. Lucian has been writing for Rolling Stone since the 70s, and he's been covering a lot of these issues. Lucian, I don't know if you know Greg, and we're also joined with Ray McClendon in Atlanta. Lucian, can you stay for the hour? Because we want to get really deep here. As you can tell, Greg Palast is the guy who broke all the stories about the stripping of the voter rolls in Florida 2000 and has pioneered the voter protection movement. So, Lucian, if you can stay with us, we appreciate it.
Okay, and, so here's the thing you have to worry about.
Hold on, Lucian, what are you saying? Okay, I can't hear you.
Here's what you have to worry about. In 2022, the group True the Vote, which created this film 2,000 Mules, got 88 Republican operatives to challenge, ready, 180,000 voters in Georgia. We were able to reverse that, and that's why Reverend Warnock was reelected. It's not like I'm favoring Reverend Warnock. I just help the voters make the decision, not the vigilantes. But are you ready for this? True the Vote, because of their beginning of their success in Georgia, has now signed up 40,000 volunteers, vigilantes, who in their own counties throughout 43 states of America are going to be challenging hundreds of thousands of voters in each state. True the Vote has already announced that they have literally challenged already, it's only August, beginning of August, they've already challenged 852,000 voters in America. Now, I can tell you right now, saying that they are illegal voters who shouldn't be allowed to vote because they're looking at things like change of address forms. Well, you know what? Right now, I'm in Portugal doing some work on this film. So I have a change of address form. Doesn't mean I'm an illegal voter. Major Gamaliel Turner was assigned to California by the President of the United States. Military man, career military officer. He was still a legal voter in Georgia. They've challenged him. And by the way, the guy who challenged him actually dresses like a vigilante. You'll see this in the film. He's got 2 loaded 6 guns, cowboy hat, boots, the whole 9 yards. These vigilantes are the new major threat. Now, Mark Elias, who is by many measures the top voting rights attorney in America at this moment, has said that this is the thing that no one's looking at. This is the big one. So Biden won Georgia by 12,000 votes, but they're going to challenge, according to the NAACP, it looks like they're going to challenge, just in Georgia alone, 300,000 to 400,000 voters.
Oh, God.
Now, they're also challenging in Texas, Arizona, 130,000 people challenged in Wisconsin, which Biden won by what, 10,000 votes? Michigan, which Biden won by just a few thousand votes. Nevada. This is the real danger, is the attack on voters of color by these non-governmental vigilantes, which are being authorized in over a score of states. So I want to tell you that the issue is racial. It's not about whether you as a white person have your vote switched when you press a button in the booth. Black voters are being, Black, Hispanic, Asian American, and American Native voters are being told, you can't vote. And they're being shunned to provisional ballots. Do you know that in 2016, there were 2.5 million provisional ballots? It's not reported in America. This is from the EAC, the Federal Elections Assistance Commission. This isn't Greg Powell's conspiracy theory. This is the official number from the federal government. 2.5 million people were shunted to provisional ballots. 43%, according to the EAC, of those ballots were disqualified. So people walked up, they said, your name's not on the voter rolls. Here's a provisional ballot. We'll fill that out. Over 1 million votes were not counted. 1 million votes were thrown in the garbage. Now, if it were random, it wouldn't matter. But if you're Asian American, the chances you will be shunted to provisional ballot is, ready? This is the EAC number again. I want to give you the official number. You're 300% more likely to be shunted to provisional ballot if you are Asian American. And nearly the same 300%, about 284% of Black people are shunted to provisional ballots compared to white people, and nearly the same number for Hispanics. So it's not random. There's 1 million votes, which are overwhelmingly voters of color. We've had a massive purge of the voter rolls. And in my film, you'll meet Christina Jordan. I was at the Atlanta polling station when she was told, you can't vote here anymore. This is Martin Luther King's cousin. It was her 50th year that she's going to vote at the same place. She's never moved. They said, you don't live in Atlanta anymore, you can't vote here. Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin. I went to the house that they said that she didn't live in. And there was a picture of her at that house with Martin Luther King having Sunday brunch because after they'd come back from church. This is what's going on.
Wow.
What you have to understand, it's racial and it's political. They went after Asian American voters because they vote 73% Democratic, almost as, and then you have obviously the black vote. This is the danger that has to be confronted, is the purging the ballots and especially the vigilantes. So I encourage you to go to gregpalast.com, sign up for there's no charge, sign up for my weekly send outs of investigative material.
Okay.
And next month, you'll be able to download for free Vigilantes, Inc., America's Vote Suppression Hitmen. Right?
Greg, that's a mind-boggling presentation. Ray McClendon, I want to introduce you to Lucian Truscott, both of you guys. Lucian has been covering these issues. Ray, do you mind if I let Lucian speak for a minute before we jump to you?
Sure, go ahead.
Please, Lucian, go ahead. You've been covering these issues for a long time. You've got your own theories about what's going to happen in this election. You just heard Greg Palast, and we're about to hear Ray McClendon, who's in Atlanta. Do you want to jump in with your own take on this, please?
Well, I wrote a Substack recently about this whole thing where the Trump administration, the Trump people are enlisting these election deniers in the vote certification process around the country. And that seems to be their, apart from what Greg is talking about, voter registration and all the rest of it, that seems to be one of their big tactics this time. It looks to me like it looks to everyone, like they're preempting what they did in 2020. Everything in 2020 was after the fact, after Trump lost. This time, they appear to be preparing for Trump to lose in all this stuff about the certification people. And the problem is that certification of elections has been what they call a ministerial duty or job over the years. A lot of these people, if they're not volunteers, they're paid very little money. They work for the states that hold the election or the counties, and basically they've been rubber stampers. They count the ballots get counted, and they say this is this number, that's that number. They sign their name and move the paperwork on, and it ends up on election night with this guy won and that guy lost, or this woman won and that guy lost. Now they've lined up a bunch of them who are basically going to try to refuse to
with Al Jordan.
certify. You want to speak, Greg?
So frankly,
Go right ahead.
Hold on. Okay, Greg's muted. Go ahead.
They're going to refuse to certify the elections in their counties. There was a story in Rolling Stone that was really a really good examination of all this. And in fact, I have to say, Rolling Stone has been excellent in this election. It's not run by Jan Wenner and the old people anymore. It's run by some new company. I don't know who they are, but boy, somebody ought to give them a Pulitzer this year. because they've done incredible work. And this story on the election certifiers was one of them.
Well, I want to point out, and after 2004, when the election was stolen in Ohio, Bobby Kennedy Jr. At the time came and interviewed me and Bob Petrakis, and the Rolling Stone was the only major national publication that ran, that I know of, except for Greg's writing, that ran a major story on the theft of 2004. So there is a continuity there.
Yeah, they've done an incredible job. I just wanted to compliment them.
Well, let me ask you the mechanics of certification. If a state does not certify, and Ray McClendon certainly knows what's going on in Georgia about this. If a state does not certify, what happens in the Electoral College?
Well, there's a lot of steps before the state does it, or the county. It starts in the counties. And then a lot of these people that they've got are the people that count the votes in the counties. And it starts there. And that's where a lot of the lawsuits are going to be filed. The Rolling Stone story indicated they talked to Elias and others, and they've indicated that the Democrats have lined up lawyers ready to go to sue to force the certification of these county elections and then state elections. Apparently, the theory is they think if they can get one or two counties in a state to refuse to certify the vote in their county, that's going to keep the state vote from being certified. And then if the state vote isn't certified, electors can't be assigned, and it's kind of a series of dominoes from there. And I think that the point I tried to make in the story I wrote was, the Democrats are going to go in and sue in these places. And one of the things about elections is elections have the uncomfortable effect of producing their own evidence, which is votes. And votes get counted, and counted votes count as counted votes. And there are recounts ordered. And then, as we saw in 2020, recounts and recounts after that. And, the lawsuits that were filed in 2020 by the Republicans didn't produce any evidence of fraud. That's what they're going to try to do in this certification process, is say there was fraud in this vote. They're going to have to produce evidence in court of fraud. And when they can't produce evidence of fraud, they end up in the uncomfortable position of basically proving a negative. That's why those 60 cases got thrown out in 2020. And I think a lot of cases will get thrown out. A lot of the Democrats will win a lot of these lawsuits against the refusal to certify these votes in the counties. Now, what happens?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Lucian, but if the Republicans, or if either side prevents any candidate from getting 270 electoral votes, then it goes to the House of Representatives. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that's what they're trying to do, is shove it into the January 6th certification of electoral ballots and certification ultimately of the election, and get it so some of the states are saying, well, our vote isn't certified. We don't have it. I guess they're going to say we don't have any electors assigned to either candidates, and then try to push it from there into the House of Representatives. And I think anyone listening to this program knows if it goes into the House of Representatives, it is one man, one vote. It's voting by delegation, and the Republicans control enough delegations that Republicans would win any vote for the president in the House of Representatives. I don't think they're going to be able to get that far. I think the Democratic lawsuits are going to force certification of these elections, and I think it's going to look very different than they think it's going to look. But I don't know. I mean, we're all guessing here.
Well, but it doesn't go to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we know how the U.S. Supreme Court will rule.
Well, I'm not sure we do, but nevertheless, I think it depends. It seems to me that this electoral certification gambit that they've got is so bogus on its face that they're going to lose a lot of cases at the federal district level and at the state level. And I mean, I may sound like I'm way too optimistic here, judging by what's been said so far, but I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Republicans than they think it's going to be. And the other thing is that there's a kind of an unknown here, but it's something that I think we have to pay attention to. We can all see that the energy that the Democratic Party has got, the Kamala Harris campaign has got in this campaign, and the turnout at the rallies, the energy behind Kamala Harris and so forth. I think if Kamala Harris wins on election, in other words, the networks declare she's the winner of the overall vote, and she gets enough electoral votes, let's say 270 electoral votes. See, the Republicans think that she can get 270 or more, and they can still screw it up in the certification in the Senate and the House. But I think if she gets enough electoral votes on election night, I don't think we've seen an election night like we're going to see if that happens. I mean, people are going to be in the streets everywhere. And, it's going to be, I mean, the demonstrations in the streets and so forth are going to make it really more difficult to challenge, I think, for the Republicans when they're nitpicking these certification things. But I don't know, that may be too optimistic too.
Well, you've got two things going here, and I'm going to go to Ray McClendon in Atlanta. You've got Greg's vigilante situation where hundreds of thousands of people are going to be thrown off the voter rolls in key states that have gone by very small margins. And as Greg has said, it's clearly race-based, which will affect the margins we know how. And then there's the whole mechanics. If the legal requirement is that a winner get 270 electoral votes, and if they can neutralize enough states to get it under 270, then the House decides, and we know how the House will decide. So am I wrong about those two realities?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's their plan,
Okay.
Whether they're going to be able to get to that, I don't know. I mean, it's, Georgia, I mean, we've been talking here a lot about Georgia. I saw a thing the other day that said that Kamala can lose Georgia and pick up that state and still get way over 270 electoral votes. There's the way the election looks now. I think that there are several, what do they call it, avenues,
right,
for her to win, more than 270 electoral votes. I think all the stuff that Greg was talking about, everybody has to pay attention to that, and the stuff about removing people from the rolls, all of that, I mean, that has to be dealt with, and that has to be considered.
Well,
but I think that the plan the Republicans have with this election certification, I don't think is going to work in the way that the Republicans think it is.
Well, we have with us, and Greg, his film is coming out. Well, of course, we want you to take a look at it and be in touch with Greg. Now we have with us Ray McClendon from Communities United for Justice in Atlanta. And nobody knows more about what's going on in Georgia than Ray McClendon. So Ray, tell us what's going on in Georgia, and you know, let's hear it.
Well, I certainly agree with Greg that voter suppression is alive and well. It looks like Georgia is the MAGA laboratory for voter suppression legislation, not only from SB 202, which was the response right after the 2020 election, but also it was added onto in SB 189 that just passed this past year. And what that does is really aggregate and consolidate all of the strategies that Greg appropriately discusses. So that is absolutely true, and they're taking this from Georgia and they're trying to spread it into other states. It's a comprehensive approach that they have. The highlights certainly are the voter purges, but but when you talk about decreasing drop boxes, decreasing the number of precincts, not allowing for line warmers. You know, it's illegal to even give out drinks to people standing in line to vote. Cutting back on early voting, on Sunday voting, all of those things that help those folks who are essential workers, which are the people of color that Greg alluded to, that can't get off of a job from that don't have 9 to 5 jobs, and they can't leave their job during the week to go and vote. The weekend voting is critical. So all of those things are comprehensively suppressing the vote. And so he's dealt with that. I have to say that I'm not as optimistic on this whole voter certification process. I think the Republicans have learned a lot from what they did in 2020 and how they did it and how close they came to being able to be successful. And they are taking that knowledge that they gained from that coup attempt in 2020. And they have been systematically over the last 12 to 18 months positioning MAGA radicals in various state and local election boards around the country. And their plan is to gum up the works, delay this, to throw it into chaos that would lead to either state legislatures selecting the electors, or having no electors, which then leads into what you all have already talked about with the House of Representatives. I'm just going to give you 3 names here: Janice Johnston, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. Anybody but I'm sure Greg's heard of those folks.
Yeah.
But everybody else on this call probably hasn't. And those
well, they're
are
the people that Trump called out at the rally. So what is their power now?
And why did he call out those names? Because those are the state election board members who are right now doing everything they can to be in a position to create upheaval after November 5th. They want to control the elections and give license to other like-minded local election boards across the state to not certify. So it's not only that they're trying to suppress votes in counties like Fulton, which is Atlanta, DeKalb, which is another large county contiguous to Fulton, but they want to give license to other counties like Coffee County, which, as you know, allowed the folks in to unwarranted and illegally review voter information that became a part of Fonnie Willis's case against Trump et al. here in Georgia. So I think there's a grand strategy here. They're I don't know if it was Rolling Stone or somebody did a report that showed that over 70 of these MAGA cultists have taken over as heads of county election boards in various jurisdictions. I think that's going to continue, and all they want to do is put in place a chaotic structure where the entire vote is questioned and to throw it to their Republican majorities, either in their state legislatures or in the House of Representatives. So this battle is not going to be over on November 5th. We certainly have got to educate and inform our voters. We're doing that as we speak. We'll be starting our Get Out the Vote efforts in another 30 to 45 days in earnest, with early voting starting here in Georgia on October the 15th. But the battle would not be over on November the 5th. The battle won't be over until the oath of office is taken on January the 20th.
Well, let me run this by you, Ray. Let's say that you're a Trump operative, and on November 6th, Kamala Harris has won Georgia, and that is the state that puts her over in the Electoral College. What are you going to do to prevent that from happening?
Well, we're starting now looking at what the legal remedies are, because we need to try to create standing now for what we know is going to happen. This is not something that might happen. We know that this is going to happen. They just passed, the state election board just passed last week, a new rule that says that they can make any reasonable inquiry in air quotes, on any county election. So what that says to me is that they can decide to review Dropbox procedures, to review ballots that were turned in through that process, to review provenance issues and security. They can review all of these things to delay the vote, and do it under the guise of, we just want to check to make sure that everything was done properly. So we're going to have to sue them to put them in the position on the defensive to say that you are in a ministerial role. You are not administering and supervising local election boards, and therefore you should allow the local election boards to operate. But right now they have a majority. They kicked the secretaries. One of the things that happened in the legislation was that they kicked the Secretary of State off of the state election board. And who was, even though he was Republican, at least he was a voice of reason that the integrity of the elections was intact. Now it's full on MAGA, and they're going to do everything they can to give license to local election boards to muck up the works in order to delay.
Do they have the power to prevent Georgia, and Greg is going to say probably in other states, and Lucian, do they have the power in Georgia to prevent the seating or the certification of the electoral representatives to the Electoral College so that they are not seated by January 6th when the Electoral College is scheduled to vote for?
You see, that's the interesting thing. They are not going to not certify congressional results. They're only worried about not certifying presidential results.
They have the power to prevent the seating of the presidential delegation to the Presidential Electoral College.
Yes.
So on January 6th, there are no delegates from Georgia, and there will be no electoral votes.
Correct.
And
because
if
we have reasonable inquiries going on across the state. We don't like the way the vote turned out because we think there were some discrepancies, and we're doing reasonable inquiries, and those are going to be dragged out over time to the point where they will not certify for the presidential election. This has nothing to do with certifying other results.
And if this happens in Georgia and other states where the MAGA representatives prevent the seating of electoral college delegations. Do they have the power to, on January 6th, prevent whoever wins the election from having 270 votes?
Well, if they don't certify, then you don't have electors. If you don't have enough electors, you can't get to 270. And if you don't get to 270, then it goes back to what Lucian said, it potentially could throw it to the House of Representatives.
Well,
now,
that has happened.
That can happen. That absolutely can happen. And I'm just saying that the reason we've got to put up the fight now is because I know that that is a part of their strategy. I believe that the Heritage Foundation also has this as a secret strategy, as a part of their second American Revolution. And we need to be cognizant of that. I think that we took it way too lightly in 2020 when all of this stuff was bubbling up in late November and December. And then we got caught off guard to a great extent on January 6th. And we came as close as only Mike Pence putting his thumb in the dike that we didn't have a major constitutional crisis. I believe that we are in position this time around to have that crisis because they have learned from their mistakes and they have embedded specific targets where they're going to gum up the works. And this is going to be a challenge that we're going to have to battle legally and with people in the streets protesting between November 5th and December the 14th or whatever the date is, that electors should be certified and submitted.
I think it's in January. Does anybody know the actual date?
There's a vote. The electors meet in the states. I think he's right. It's either the 12th or the 14th of December and actually cast their electoral ballots. But, he brought up a good point there that is going to be an issue in these lawsuits. The Republican Party has this theory that they can refuse to certify the presidential election and go ahead and certify the other federal elections for there won't be one in the Senate in Georgia, but for the House of Representatives. When the Democrats go into court, one of the issues they're going to raise is how can you've got the same ballots, you've got basically the same votes. How can you refuse to certify a vote on this ballot for this person and not certify the vote on the ballot for that person?
The problem with your argument is you're being logical. You're being logical, Luce. MAGA folks are not logical.
Yes, I am. And that's the way 61 lawsuits were won in 2020. I mean, you get down to a point here where really it gets down to reason and belief. When you go into court, you're dealing with evidence and reason. You can't go in there and say, well, I believe that this vote for president was not.
With all due respect, I don't know what part of the country you're in, but we have to deal with these yokels every day. There are still people who are walking around in Georgia talking about the stolen votes that Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, incorporated into the vote in Fulton County in suitcases. They really still believe that. Okay, after that has been debunked so many times. So you can't depend. And these are the people who are going to the state election board and the local election board saying there's fraud, there's going to be fraud. There was fraud in 2020, it's going to happen again. And so you all have to do what we tell you to do to protect the vote. And that's what is going to muck this up. It's not going to be reasonable people. It's going to be the MAGA zealots who are going to be out in mass at these board meetings and who have been installed in many cases on these boards, who will have the vote and they will get crucified by their people if they certify an election in some of these cases where the Harris-Walz ticket wins a particular county. I'm telling you, it's coming, and that's what I'm afraid of. So we've got to galvanize now, legally and in the streets, ready to deal with that onslaught. That wave, that tsunami is coming. It's already out in the middle of the ocean. It just hasn't reached the shore yet, but it's coming.
May I add something?
Please, Greg Palast. Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So if you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see an article about the silent coup d'etat, which Ray is talking about. It's an arcane issue called certification. 3 members of the newly created Georgia State Elections Board, 3 members that he mentioned, have voted that if a county does not conduct a, quote, reasonable inquiry of their voting systems, that their vote will not be certified. Now, this same 3 MAGA naughts, who one of them was at the Trump rally. I mean, you know, you think of elections officials shouldn't be at a Trump rally, right? One of them was at the Trump rally. So the 3 of them voted that Fulton County did not conduct a reasonable inquiry into its voting processes. Fulton County, you may know as the heart of Atlanta. So under the new MAGA group elections board operations, as Ray is warning you, they can vote to not accept Fulton County's vote totals. Now, just so you know, Joe Biden won Fulton County by a margin of 250,000 votes because it's the heart of Atlanta. It's the heart of black Georgia. But remember that Trump only lost by less than 12,000 votes. There's his 12,000 votes. If you don't certify Fulton County, if you don't certify Atlanta, it's all over, baby. It's all over. And this certification fight game, which is, you know, arcane to many people, that's the key issue. Remember that they didn't want Mike Pence to certify the electoral vote. Well, when that failed, Trump's lawyer, Cleta Mitchell, went out to make sure that as many states as they can, and they succeeded in Georgia, will agree not to certify the vote in 2024. This is no joke. Ray's got it correctly. And I'm sorry. I know that you think that the courts, there's something called the courts. What the F are you talking about? Who appointed those judges? Okay?
Well, and then
Trump appointed a lot of these judges, and I've seen these judges. I've seen these judges say, basically reject the most basic protections for the voters. And I saw this, the federal courts in Georgia, I saw this in the state courts of Georgia, and I'm seeing it in Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin. You're seeing this, believe me, this issue of certification is going to be deadly. And thank you, Ray, for bringing this up, because this is a real serious issue, and the GOP is working it hard, and we are not. And if you think this United States Supreme Court is going to overturn Georgia's failure to certify, that's not going to happen. Ray, you've got it right. It is really freaking scary. And I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you.
Lucian, do you think it's credible that
well, you know, I don't know what the F I'm talking about. You know, it's just I'm looking back at the 2020 election and I'm seeing 60 lawsuits that were lost in federal court that were brought by Democrats. Some of the judges that decided those cases were Trump appointees. Some of them were appointed by George Bush. Some of them were appointed by Clinton. You know, and the reason that they lost those cases was they didn't have any evidence. In this case, they're going to be going into, the Democrats are going to be going into federal court and saying, how can you certify election and votes for House of Representatives and not certify the presidential election? That's going to be an issue in federal court. Now,
let me tell you something.
Wait, Greg, let him finish. Go ahead, Lucian, then Greg.
If every judge who hears these cases ends up being appointed by Donald Trump, then I think, well, they'll probably lose. But that's not the way the cases are assigned, and I think that I think that Republicans are going to have a very difficult time making the case that that every vote in the state of Georgia counts, except for these ones in this county that are all black. Federal courts are not going to smile on that, I think. And
well, let me tell you this. I've been in federal court. Okay? I do a lot of litigation. And I can tell you right now that this massive attack on voters by vigilantes, a federal court just endorsed the right to do that. Now, in 1946, the Justice Department was going to indict the governor of Georgia for this vigilante attack on voter rolls. But today, in 2024, we've had federal courts say, we don't care. I don't think you are knowing what's going on in federal courts. You're talking about these crazy cases brought by Rudy Giuliani, who's completely insane and disbarred. Yes, those are wacky cases, but the courts have already endorsed these vigilante challenges. The courts have endorsed these mass purges of the voter rolls. I would not be very comfortable with relying on the federal courts, on Justice Kavanaugh and the rest of the gang to protect our vote. They're going to say these are the rules, and that's what's happened in many federal court proceedings. Yes, you're right about Giuliani's crazy court cases that were thrown out because he had no evidence. But I'm telling you, I've been in these cases where we are trying to stop the purges, trying to stop the vigilante challenges, and they have lost. Mark Elias, the best attorney in the U.S. on voting rights, lost the case in Georgia about the attack by vigilante challengers. That one voter, Major Turner, was allowed to vote, but 4,000 others were blocked. This is the beginning. We went from 88 vigilante voter challenges to 40,000. They've already challenged 852,000 voters, and they're proud of that. I think we've got a very big problem of vote suppression, which is not being addressed, including by the Democratic Party.
Let me say that I think two things can be in play at the same time, and two things can be true at the same time. I think that Lucian's point about the unanimous rejection of those 60 cases back in 2020, absolutely that precedent can hold. But we got to remember those cases were coming from Republican operatives on behalf of the Trump campaign.
Yes.
And they were trying to produce third-party evidence that was shaky, that was not corroborated or whatever. What I'm dealing with here is a different bureaucratic construct that they have put in place to slow the process down to a screeching halt. Okay? and have just enough of a smack of authenticity to where they can represent as the authorized bureaucrats in the state to say that, oh, well, Your Honor, you know, we just see these problems and we can make reasonable inquiries, as Greg pointed out. And these inquiries, we just need more information and more data and more information, and we just can't get it. When we do, we'll submit it to the courts. And this can drag on and on to the point where they run the clock out and then throw up their hands and say, we just can't certify in a timely fashion to give the electors, to submit electors by the time that is required by Congress, and therefore we just throw our hands up and it's thrown to Congress at that point. That's what I'm talking about. The Republicans are notorious about knowing how to run the clock out. That's what they've done over and over again in various, look at all of these Supreme Court cases that they have lost, that we still ended up using gerrymandered maps that were determined to be illegal, but they drug it out so long until they said, well, you might have won in the court, but it's too late for us now to change the map. So we got to use these old maps.
Right. That's happened in Ohio with the Supreme Court.
It happened in Ohio. It happened in Alabama. It's happened in Georgia before.
And North Carolina.
Okay.
So the question then becomes, is there a hard constitutional date by which certified electoral delegations must cast their ballots for the president? And if the 270 is not reached, it thereby, in a hard date, goes into the Congress, into the House. Is that, there's no extending the date beyond which the electors must present themselves.
That date, I think, is December 14th for submitting.
And then there's a vote in the Congress in 20, it was January 6th. I assume there's another January 6th type of deadline. But if the state of Georgia, as you're predicting, if Harris wins the popular vote in Georgia, these three members of the election board can delay the certification of the Georgia electoral delegation, no matter what the courts say, and show up in January 6th, 7th, whatever it is, and say there's no delegation from Georgia, therefore there's no 270, therefore the Congress decides, the House of Representatives decides the next president. Is that
That's the doomsday scenario. That's the doomsday scenario that I think they are pointing toward. That's the reason that Trump called them out and used the term, these are the folks that are going to show us the way to victory. That's the reason he pointed them out in that rally. I also believe that's the reason that the head of the Heritage Foundation said there's going to be a second American Revolution, and there's some things we can't tell you about right now. They're planning for this right now to be the case.
And that's
let me add a technical point, if I may.
Please.
When it goes to the House of Representatives, if no one has 270 votes because several states have, Georgia or other states have said we're not certifying our vote.
Right.
In which case it goes to the House, but it's one state, one vote.
Right.
One state, one vote. So that's automatically a Republican win because Republicans have more state delegations, but they don't have the majority of the public. So it's one state, one single vote.
Now, this did happen, I believe, in 1828 and also in 1876. Lucian, you said there was an article in Rolling Stone. This is the doomsday scenario. The Republicans say in Georgia, say in North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, whichever swing state they can do it, can refuse to certify the Electoral College delegation. They show up or don't show up on January 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever it is. There are not enough votes, presuming that Harris wins. She still won't have enough electoral votes to get to 270, even though she may have won by 10 million popular votes. and therefore lacking sufficient electoral college votes, it goes into the House of Representatives where Donald Trump will win. That's the doomsday scenario. Is that dealt with, Lucian, in the article that you referenced in Rolling Stone?
Yeah. Yeah, they said that that's what lies behind the plan. I mean, apparently at this point, everybody knows what they're up to, and everybody knows what they intend to do. I think that the funny thing to me is they've laid the plan out. So the Democrats, the Harris campaign, we have to look at the Harris campaign and assume that either they're asleep at the switch, or they're lining up lawyers and lining up ready to have lawsuits to force the certification of these these ballots. You know what you're talking about in talking about certification is not certification, but disenfranchisement. They're intending to disenfranchise tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people of their vote, because one person is planning, because the Heritage Foundation says they are, and the Trump people say they are, to with a stroke of the pen, to say, well, these votes don't count. That's going to end up in federal court, and we'll have to see. I'm sure the Harris campaign is prepared for that, and that's going to end up in federal court. And I guess we know what happens.
But as we learned in 2000, after the Brooks Brothers mob, he had a violent coup at an election board in 2000 in Florida. And the Supreme Court, as I don't have to tell anybody here, voted 5-4. And the guy who lost the popular vote by 500,000 votes nationwide became president. I mean, conceivably,
I remember that as well as you do.
Yes, of course. I thought you were too young. You look too young to have been. Anyway, so what can happen in 2024? Correct me if I'm wrong, Lucian or Greg or Ray. What can happen in 2024 is that Kamala Harris could win by 5, 6, 7 million votes. Hillary Clinton won by 3 million, and the Republicans fail to send or block the electoral delegations from Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, pick 2 or 3 or 4 states, and it's insufficient, and it goes to the federal courts and winds up with the Supremes. And 3 of the Supremes, I don't have to tell you, were part of the Brooks Brothers mob, and then Clarence Thomas was one of the votes on the 5-4. What happens here? What are we looking at? I mean,
the way this discussion is going is there's no hope.
No.
We're going to lose.
We're looking for hope.
We're going to lose.
This is not a pessimistic call, as people can tell you. We're looking for solutions here. This is what we try, and you've offered ideas here. We need to know what's going to work. We're not going to sit by and let this happen, for God's sakes. But that's why we're here talking about it. So how do we defeat this doomsday scenario?
Yeah, forewarned is just being forearmed here. I mean, we need to be aware of what the other side is doing so that we're not playing defense all the time. Progressives tend to be more reactionary. We're not proactive enough. And so we're just sounding the clarion call now so that everybody understands there's a battle brewing that's not on the surface. Everybody's energized and excited about getting the vote out, and that's true. And we've got to keep that energy going, and we need to win overwhelmingly, but recognize that the battle is not over on November the 5th. It's going to continue in some of these states, and we just need to be prepared for it. We're not going to pop champagne and go off on vacation on November the 5th if we're successful. We know that there's going to be more work ahead. That's really the whole focus.
Well, I think that the Harris campaign, look at it a Harris campaign gives us some idea of what may happen after November the 5th. The Harris campaign hasn't had one day of playing defense. Not one day. Not for 3 weeks. The Harris campaign is on offense. I think that they'll probably be on offense after November the 5th.
Well, we look to your next article about that in Rolling Stone, and but we are not pessimists by any means, and but we you know, as Ray says, forewarned is forearmed. We need a strategy now. Everybody was kind of caught by surprise on January 6th, and somehow, thank God, we got through it. Who would have thought that Mike Pence would have saved American democracy? I mean, really, talk about unlikely heroes. Jeez. But, you know, now, you know, thanks to your reporting, thanks to Rolling Stone, whoever is running it now, you know, this is a known quantity. You know, as Rumsfeld would have said, we know what we know. And then there we go. And thanks to Greg with the film. I hope you'll watch Greg's film, by the way. You know, this is where we're at. What are we going to do? We know what they can do. You know, Greg did the original reporting on what happened in 2020. We weren't prepared for that, for God's sakes. Who would have thought that a violent mob would come in and storm an election board in South Florida and put George W. Bush in the White House, for God's sakes? So that's what we're looking about again. Greg or Ray or Lucian, do you want to jump in? We're going to continue. This is about the most important conversation. And you got
the only thing I'd like to jump in about right now is I don't work for Rolling Stone. I write a Substack. You write a Substack, lucianprescott.substack.com. So if you want to read what I have to say, that's where you're going to have to go to see it.
Well, put us on your list, please. You got my email. And, you know, we look forward to what you write. And,
okay.
You know, we've got, 80, however many days left until the election. And then, as Ray says, the days after that. And we're going to have to deal with this. It's quite obvious, you know.
I think so.
Okay, man. Thank you. Greg Palance, you want to jump in? Ray, and then we got some hands.
All I want to say is that look, get prepared. And on September 13, our film will release for free. It's narrated by Rosario Dawson. Martin Sheen is the producer with George DiCaprio, and it will be released on September 13th for free at gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com. You can also sign up for my investigative reports there. If that sounds like an ad, yeah, because it's going to get you the information you need to save this sorry nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Ray, Greg, you'll come back. You'll have to wear that same hat, though. That's my favorite hat.
This is I'm in Portugal now. I'll switch back to my American investigative reporter hat.
All right. Ray McClendon, you're going to get the last word here, and then we're going to take calls.
Now, this has been a very important discussion. We are certainly energized. The increase in enthusiasm and optimism is palpable over the last 3 weeks. We're seeing it on the ground here in Georgia. So by no means are we pessimistic, but we're also realistic about the battle that faces us because of the shenanigans and underhanded tactics that we see being employed that have been building over the last year and a half or so. And we just need to be prepared for it. We know that there will be lawyers, certainly from the campaign, but they can't be everywhere. This is going on in 159, will be the topic of 159 county local election boards here in Georgia. And we want to be ready to engage with them as necessary, as well as with the state election board. And I'm sure that's going to be the case in many other states and counties, local election boards across this, particularly the South. So we want to be prepared for that and be ready to have our people to blunt the onslaught that we anticipate is going to come from MAGA folks getting out in the street when Trump calls for them, saying that the election has been stolen. He said it all over the, reiterates it every single time he has a rally, that the election was stolen. And the only way they can win is to steal it again. So we need to be ready and anticipate what's to come.
Woof, man, that was, that was a serious hour. We've got some hands. Ruth Strauss, you had your hand up first. Lynn, TATANKA, MYLA, and Wendy. Go ahead. Ruth? Ruth, I got to unmute you, God.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, I am a proud owner of Greg's film. It's fantastic. And he is actually having an event here, as I understand it, in Los Angeles under KPFK. So people, please turn out for that. That's number one. Number two, with Ray, two things. One is that I heard on Tom Hartman that there was a website that's up there where people can, quote unquote, disenroll from voting if they use their social security numbers. I mean, the whole concept is weird. The problem is that Tom said that the social security numbers of everybody were posted on the site so that other people could actually disenroll voters. So I want to know about that. And the second thing is this whole business about paper ballots and that Emily was talking about. The other problem is a lot of these, I think, are provisional ballots that don't get counted. So if you could address those two things, thanks.
Sure. First of all, there is a portal that was ill-conceived and was prematurely rolled out that had some major problems on people being allowed to cancel their votes. So just think about the problem with that. If somebody gets a hold of your information, your full name, address, they can put that information in. All they need is the last four of your social, and they potentially could fraudulently purge you from the voter rolls. So not only did that occur at one point, and this flaw was fixed that you referred to, where at one point all you had to do was put in somebody's name and address, and the Social Security, the 4 digits of the social would pop up. And so that information was made available on the site. So they fixed that flaw, but many people are just concerned that if that could happen just with a layperson using the site and could potentially be in that situation, could get access to that kind of information. What about professional hackers? We know that the Trump campaign just got hacked, allegedly by a foreign government. What if a foreign government were to infiltrate this portal? They could completely muck up the entire voting rolls of the state of Georgia. So there are a number of people who are now attempting to force the state of Georgia to take this site down until it can be fully vetted by forensic IT experts who are versed in global hacking matters to make sure this site is 100% secure. I don't understand why they need it anyway, but be that as it may, it's a major security risk from many people's perspective that we are monitoring daily. And your second question was about paper. Was it paper ballots?
Ray, this is Emily Levy. It was about the emergency paper ballots in Georgia, and Ruth, those are not the same thing as provisional ballots. They're regular paper ballots that would be marked by hand and would be counted using the same scanners that are used now in Georgia to count the votes.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. The big thing that we're concerned about with provisional ballots is all the changes that have occurred from the various state laws that have gone into effect, and how that has impacted precincts, how it's impacted voting location. etc. We are going to be putting forward a major push for early voting. We want people to vote early, so that for two reasons. Number one, if you vote early, you can vote anywhere in the county. So in a case like Fulton County, you would have, a couple of dozen locations that you could go vote anytime. The second is that if you do have, therefore, if you do vote early and you have an issue with some other part of your voter registration, you have a lot of time to cure that flaw in whatever it is. And we found that to be very helpful, because there are a number of provisional ballots that get kicked out because they don't get cured when they are done on election day. So that's one of the ways we're going to try to combat the whole provisional ballot challenges that get tons of votes thrown out. We can't hear you.
There we go. Thank you. Listen, we usually shut down at 4:20, but I'm not going to shut this down. We got 55 people with us. We're going to talk as long as we need to. That last hour was about as important as it possibly can get. Steve Caruso, you're our erstwhile engineer. If you have to go, maybe you can turn it over to MYLA or Wendy, and we want to keep, MYLA, you good? We want to keep going with this. And really probably as terrifying an hour-long conversation as anybody could ever have in the United States of America. And Ray, we really appreciate you and Greg being with us. Thank you so much. And Lucian, I don't know if Lucian left, but I think it's great to have him as well. Lynn Feinerman, please.
Yes,
Feinerman,
Harvey, Myla has asked to go before me, so please take me on next.
It was just because I lost my place in line.
And Wendy was before Myla.
Right. So you want to let Wendy go?
Well, Lynn and Tatanka haven't spoken, and Myla, and I mean Lynn and Wendy and Myla, please. But Lynn, go ahead, then Tatanka, then Wendy and Myla.
Okay. Mine is a question of clarification. I'm glad Ray's still on, and a couple of other people who might know the answers to this. Lynn Sorum in the chat raised an interesting possibility, and that is that would it be the House, would the incapacity to certify and the challenge be made to the present sitting House of Representatives, or would it be made to the House of Representatives to come and be seated after the election? This I find interesting because
it would be the new Congress, but the point that it would be the new Congress, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just interested because, Walk the Walk said that, for example, California is among their high priorities to fill the House with Dems. And so I'm wondering if there is a chance that, given that it would be the new sitting House, unless, Mike Johnson pulls a crime, is it possible that we should be concentrating more on getting more Democratic House members in there as a real way to stand off this assault on the process? Thank you.
Yeah, it only helps you marginally because remember the point that Greg Pallas made, which is, one delegation gets one vote. So although you might have a Democratic majority, you won't have a majority of the delegations. So as an example, here in Georgia, we can win an additional seat or two, but the reality is that the Republicans will outvote us, and that would be the same thing in virtually every southern state and many of the Midwestern states. So having huge majorities in New York and California, Illinois, etc., won't make the difference because California only has one vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ray. Tatanka, go ahead, please. Tatanka.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you midweek, Ray. I want to know when you say be prepared, you know, so everybody goes out and gets Greg movie, we spread it, everybody knows the game. What else can we do to help be prepared with you, with the election there on the ground? I mean, all the things you can think of. I just want to fill it out. When you said we need the legal and we need people in the streets and we, you know, et cetera. Can you just expound a little bit on, if you had a wish list, you know what they're trying to do, and the biggest wish you could have if we had a, you know, it's a good day to die mentality and people were willing to show up and have a true, you know, a civil rights movement around this to protect?
Well, the first is legal from my standpoint. We are in the process now of looking for legal resources, as you've been helpful to Tatanka in creating conversations with folks like Danny Sheehan, where we can look at getting some legal help to get standing. See, one of the things we want to do as civic engagement organizations is to sue them now. We want to sue the state election board now to let them know that not only are we going to be in the meetings, the next meeting is August 19th, not only are we going to be in the meetings, but we're also suing you to do your job and only your job. That way we'll have, when things come up later after the election, we'll already have standing. So that's one of the things that we want to do, is to identify lawyers that can support us and the resources for those lawyers to file the appropriate legal proceedings. So that's one. Number two, we need folks to be there all day. So, you know, we need resources. We need funding to help pay people to literally sit in these meetings. As an example, with the state election board, they started at 9 a.m. and went all day. Then they came back the next day. And we had to, but you have to have people there at 7 in the morning to be able to get in line to get into either the primary meeting room in the state capitol or into the overflow room. So we had people there at 7 in the morning, and those folks had to stay there all day. So a lot of people can't do that unless you can give them some kind of stipend in order to do that. The MAGA folks bust in from what we got the intel on. They bust in folks from all over the state to the last meeting last week, when they put in place that reasonable inquiry rule that gives them the flexibility to essentially ask for anything they want to ask for to slow down the certification process. They had folks lined up. They get up, they give them 3 minutes to speak. We need to be able to counteract that, and we need resources for that as well. I anticipate that after November 5th, there are going to be mass demonstrations. And once again, we're going to need to be prepared to organize countermeasures against the mass demonstrations that the MAGAs are going to be bussing in to these election certification meetings. They're going to be asking their people to deny the certifications. There's going to be tremendous pressure. Remember what happened in Wayne County, Detroit, last time where Trump was calling into those folks. There's going to be tremendous pressure. We need to have counter pressure going on at the same time. Again, to organize those rallies and everything en masse, we're going to need resources for that. So those are the levels that we see, both a combination of legal response, but also civic in the streets response in a major way. And that takes resources to do.
Thank you.
Greg,
and just really quick with Greg, can I just say one thing with Greg?
Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
I hope he's still here.
He is, but I can't get him
okay.
unmuted.
Hi,
there we go.
There I am.
I was in Oakland on the night of Obama election. Then I interviewed you in San Francisco with a 1-hour interview afterwards. And you explained to me, I said, what happened? We're going to have all these votes, Democratic votes that weren't counted. And you said something that I kept repeating for years that people didn't know. I said, well, yeah, the turnout was great. Obama is president and the Republicans won. And you explained how all the down ballot things, all these Tea Party guys didn't really get elected, et cetera, et cetera. And Obama's going to be a nice guy and the Republicans are at war and they'll just wait 4 to 8 years till they come do it again. And it seems this time the approval on that is that Kamala may get 10 million more votes and it won't be Kamala won, but we won't even get the president. If they have
so look, it's you can't win by 51% of the vote. You got to win by 54, 55% of the vote. You have to overwhelm them. And what I saw in Georgia, for example, when I did all this work in Georgia about the mass purges, it's the worst state in America in terms of voting. And yet they have John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock, who are the two of the most progressive senators in America, were elected in Georgia. And because basically you have to overwhelm the steal.
What is the number of that?
Also, there was one other thing that had to be done. We were very, very successful. I worked with Rainbow Push, NAACP, ACLU, a New Georgia Project, and others. The main thing that we have to do is tell people to check their damn registrations 60 days before an election. We had billboards with Rosario Dawson over Atlanta. We had my film was in every little town in Georgia. And the main thing I'm telling people is check your registration 2 months before the election. And if you're purged, if you're gone, re-registered. If you move down the street, even though you don't have to re-register, re-register. It's register, re-register. It's just like Martin Luther King's cousin, 92 years old. She was going to the same voting station for 50 years. She showed up and she was knocked off the voter rolls. If she had checked your registration, she would have known that. It doesn't matter if you've been there 48 years. When you're going in for your 50th year, you better check your damn registration. That's the number one thing. We had the Southwest Registration Education Project, a big Hispanic grassroots group. They called 150,000 voters in Georgia who had been knocked off the voter rolls and to get them to re-register. That's the number one thing you can do. Now, in terms of certification, I can't change what Georgia and other states are trying to do, this attack on certifying the vote. And I don't trust the Supreme Court. I don't trust the federal courts. I don't trust anyone at this point. But I can tell you this, the way to win is to overwhelm the steal. And that means, first and foremost, please do check your registration. Tell everyone you know, check your registration. And if you get a placebo ballot, which is what I call provisional ballots, remember 43% get rejected. So don't let them tell you if you fill out a provisional ballot, it's okay, we'll count it. If you bring more ID than you've ever had in your life to a voting station.
Okay.
But definitely try to vote. By the way, also vote early in person if you can do it. Don't mail in your ballot if you can avoid it. I'm for mail-in balloting as much as possible, allows millions of people to vote who wouldn't otherwise vote, but damn it, according to MIT, about 1 in 7 ballots mailed in are never, ever counted.
So to get your vote counted, you have to vote early and vote often.
Vote early, vote often.
Okay.
We'll leave that last part out for please edit that out.
Okay.
I know.
Joke.
I have to leave in a minute, and I wonder if I could just get a.
Yeah, go ahead, Mama, then Wendy, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Ray, I just wanted to ask you, I think you missed our guests earlier, Seth Fleischer and Emily Baldwin from Walk the Walk. Are you familiar with their work?
No, I'm not.
Well, their work really mirrors what you and Andrea have been doing in terms of they've been raising funding for relational organizing, focusing on empowering voters and people of color primarily. And
That's great.
Lynn Feinerman referenced Walk the Walk earlier, and I'd really hoped that you would be on at the same time as them. They gave
Well, they'll come back next week.
Well, we're hoping they will come back next week. We invited them back. And I'm just wanted to point them out to you. And I'm hoping that you will connect with them, whether or not they come back next week. I really want to put you in touch with them.
That'd be great. If you can arrange that, I'd love to talk to them if they're working in Georgia or North Carolina or any place else. Andrea and I are working together, and absolutely.
Thank
you,
MYLA. Thank you for that. Ray, that'll be good to connect you next week with them. And we'll go to Wendy. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. Is Greg still with us? Is he listening in?
Yeah, Greg's there.
All right, cool. Thank you. So, yeah, I actually had the idea to for you guys to talk, and hi, Greg. Thank you so much for being here. So yeah, I came across, I found out through Ray Lutz just a couple weeks ago. Ray is the guy who ran the numbers in Arizona 2020 and proved the ninjas wrong, right? So it was his auditing software that proved that Biden won in Arizona, and the overcount or the recount was overseen by John Brakey, who's another progressive activist who is working with Republican Senator Ken Bennett. And so John's actually been arrested for trying to just observe. He got hit with trespassing for observing elections. He's been sued for making public records requests, like you said, that they do preserve a lot of the time, or they do have the images. Sometimes it's not ubiquitous, but they're not always preserved. And when people try to get those records, there can be consequences. And so these are the people that actually proved that Biden won. And now Ray makes videos debunking the 2,000 mules and all the false claims. And in my view, like having a nonpartisan, a nonprofit, independent system that people can all agree on, no matter what your politics are, or where you come from. Because I'm in Florida. My first vote was for Gore, and we know how that went. And then I volunteered with the DNC to oversee the recount and to try to cure the provisional ballots for the DeSantis race. And they made it impossible. And in my heart, I blame them for us having DeSantis. And now we have 8 blue districts and 20 red districts, because there's like, it's corporate capture no matter who. And so I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. That's why I want to reach out to you later, but thank you. So in Atlanta recently, like tens of thousands, like a mass number of ballots that were already cast, that were dropped off in drop boxes, were dropped in the wrong precinct. And there's no system to process this. So all of those votes were thrown out. So what the people like who have been, worried about our election security, I can't even say integrity anymore, because that's been co-opted by the wolves watching the hen house. And it's like, who is qualified to watch these wolves? Because it's, when you get into deep numbers and complexities, it's about voter literacy and people understanding how the election process works. To me, it's from registration to verification. It doesn't stop when you cast your vote, because I'm from Florida and I know better. So I would just really, really love to introduce you to Ray Lutz and John Brakey. And we have Paul Burke, who's on the call with us now, who has Vote Well, and he can tell you all kinds of ways that votes are suppressed without, like, that we would never even imagine. Like, we all have the same goals, and we need to have a system that isn't like based on beliefs, that's based on data that we can all come together and agree with. And I love your work, Greg, and I'm just so glad to have you here. And I really respect Ray, and I think we all have the same goals, and there's a lot of assumptions, and I would just love to demystify that and continue the conversation, and I'll reach out to you if that's all right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do. Greg Palast at gregpalast.com. I usually don't give out my email, but please do get, because what I think we need to do is show some, let's show my film in, I was just talking to a station in Sarasota, Bradenton, and I've often been down in Tampa. Let's do some showings of the film, because Florida, especially, as you know, back in 2000, they knocked off tens of thousands of Black people saying they were felons. Not a single one was an illegal voter. But this is the games that are being played. We have this vigilante attack in Georgia. Donald Trump's own attorney, Cleta Mitchell, is leading the challenge of voters in Florida using a system called Eagle AI. It's this garbage thing. I don't know what town you're in, but why don't I show up and let's make some trouble and show the film and make some trouble. What do you think? What do you say?
I would love to. I'm in Miami, but I'm actually on the board of the Broward Progressive Caucus, where we have citizens audit Broward. So yeah, we have a nice little infrastructure. We'd love to
just send me a note at gregpalace@gregpalace.com, and we'll hook up a showing and let's get this done.
Thank you,
Okay,
Greg.
very good. Good connection. I can connect both of you. Steve Hoffman and then Ron Leonard.
Yeah, thank you
We're
very
getting down
much.
to the end here, folks. If you have anything you want to say, raise your hand now, because we are going to sign off. So Steve can go hang out. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks very much. I'm thinking a little bit outside the box, and I'm wondering that, you know, with the new powers that the president has gotten from the Supreme Court, and I'm wondering if there's some kind of concoction that can be made in terms of national security involving counting the ballots, that we can like bring out the National Guard or get them prepared to seize all the voting machines and get a fair count, maybe involve Ray and John's efforts to do some quick counting. And, you know, if the Supreme Court gave the president like absolute power, why can't he help the election go through? That's about what I had to say.
Well, that's a good point. Ray or Greg, you want to speak to that? Well, we'll hopefully, as they say, from your lips to Joe's ears. But good point. Ron Leonard, please. Oh, I got to unmute you here. Ron Leonard. Again, folks, if you want to speak, raise your hand because we're going to sign off fairly soon. I can't get you unmuted for.
No, we're good. We're good. We're good.
Okay, go ahead.
So there is a federal law that sort of addresses the question of standing, and I actually had a question about it, and that is posse comitatus, where you do not want to have members of the military involved in local proceedings and state issues, but federal marshals could conceivably be involved in this process, and it would be worth our time to find out whether those entities can go into a state and enforce local law, frankly. And, you know, Ray, I felt a certain magic in the air last night. We were on a meeting together where Andrea really showed that America, I think, has turned a corner. And that is a very important part of this whole process. If we can really understand that the T-Rumpers are no longer in charge, and I again have a magical way of looking at that. There's a campground near me where for years campers would be there and have large Trump flags and would have trucks, pickup trucks running around back and forth with flags on the back of them. It is all gone. They just do not exist anymore. Something has occurred in the air, and I think it's in our favor, and I think we should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
I took down the Trump flag off my pickup, and I took my gun off the gun rack. So
you gotta fix that one that's upside down, Harvey. Don't turn it over. Turn it
Ray,
over.
are you seeing in Georgia a diminishment of Trump banners around the state?
Yes, yeah. Well, let me put it this way. I've seen some Harris and Harris Walls banners in places that you normally wouldn't see them. So I think there's a confluence of energy, as was just being described, that really feels a lot like 2008.
Yeah.
And that's what we have got to ride that wave, seize that energy, ride that wave, and let's try to ride it to an overwhelming victory, as Greg pointed out. That's the way that we can immediately overcome some of the shenanigans that we know will be at play, is if we can potentially have North Carolina, Ohio, states like that in play, in addition to Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia, then that really could turn into a rout. And I think the more that potential is there, I think that the other side, the MAGA folks, are going to continue to implode. They are already fighting themselves, and we want to see that continue.
Well, I guess the question then becomes, after accounting for Greg's report on disenfranchisement, how many millions of votes would she have to win by to guarantee access to the White House?
Well, it's not the millions of votes, it's how many votes can she flip in key states that now might be in play that otherwise were not in play. So you take Ohio. Ohio really wasn't in play. So how many votes would that take? Maybe 200,000, 250,000? That's what I'm saying. So it's not millions of votes to win the popular vote in aggregate. It's what states can she strategically go after. Florida could be in play now.
Exactly.
That could be huge.
Well, I think actually, and this was the reason I was so interested in Roy Cooper, I think probably the most important state is North Carolina. But, what do I know at this point? But, Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes.
But here's the thing. The reason that North Carolina is in play now is because of the atrocious candidacy of the governor.
He's mind-boggling, that guy.
Worse than bad. And so that's going to drag the entire Republican ticket down in Georgia. So it is definitely in play.
Yeah, that's why I was interested in Roy Cooper, who I still think would have been a good choice, but he's very much a gentleman and stepped back. Well, but like I say, Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes, but then Joe Biden won by 7 million. Somewhere in there is a national number that will be unassailable, and we don't know what that is. I will also want to point out, by the way, I'll never forget this. There's a documentary about Shirley Chisholm, of the first Black woman to run for president. She ran in 1972. She said that the pushback she got as a woman was way stronger than the pushback she got as a Black person. Very interesting. So that, this is an archetypal election. The idea that a woman of color could be the most powerful person on earth, that is Darwinian. I mean, that's off the charts. So we need to look at that. Lynn Feinerman, anybody else want to jump in? I know Steve is ready to go walk outside. Lynn Feinerman, go ahead, please, Lynn. And then that'll be the last, unless someone raises.
Okay. I'm still trying to get clarity on this question of the vote of the House of Representatives. In the actual constitutional amendment, it says, a quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. Now, I presume that means a majority of those 2/3 of the states. Is that correct? And if that is correct, are we looking at? I'm trying to figure what we should focus on in terms of down ballot, and if we could flip some of the states so that we have the 2/3 in the Democrats camp, and is that possible?
I don't know where the 2/3 is coming in. Basically, my understanding is if the 270 is not achieved, the vote goes to the House, and the House decides one state, one vote.
Right, but
And
it says in the amendment, a quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of
Oh,
the state.
that's for quorum. Well, they'll get a quorum, but it's a simple majority of the states to, the only state, or one of the few states I think that could flip, actually, weirdly enough, maybe I'm just dreaming, would be Nebraska. Because Walls is from Nebraska. And Nebraska is one of the 2 states in the country where they split their electoral vote. And there is basically a district, Omaha, that has its own electoral vote, independent of the state. And I will bet you right now that the Democrats will carry that electoral vote from Omaha because he's from Nebraska. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know how the
Again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer either, but I think the operative term there is quorum just deals with when they can take the issue up.
Right.
Will they have a quorum? It
Yeah.
says the majority of the states. The
Right.
majority of the states is one vote per state, and it would be based upon that state's number of representatives voting as a caucus. And that's where you end up with the problem because, it's just like in the Senate. The Republicans have disproportionate
states
rule because of the number of states where they have the majority.
Right.
Okay, they don't have the number of popular votes, just like they might not have the number of representatives. I truly believe we'll have a Democratic majority in the House, but that does not translate into the number of one state, one vote majority. And that's where the problem is.
And then there's always
And
the
so
question.
yeah, right. And so I was wondering, are there, how close are we? Is I guess is
Not
what
close.
I'm saying. And can we
That's the problem. We're not close.
We're not close.
We're
No.
not close. That's
So we
the challenge.
cannot aim for down ballot to get rid of a bunch of Republican reps.
We
No.
likely can pick up a few votes in the South, but the main votes will be in New York and California. And you already have those delegations.
Yeah.
So that's not going to help you
Right.
to pick up more representatives in the House in New York and California for a one state overall vote.
Right. So the Democrats will
majority to have a Speaker of the House, but not for this if it got thrown into the House for an election.
Right. So the Democrats lost a bunch of seats in New York and in California in the last election that they're likely to pick back up. But that won't affect the one state, one vote in the electoral vote for the president.
Can we challenge that? It's a constitutional challenge, but we cannot challenge.
Well, there should be a constitutional amendment, but we certainly don't have enough time to do that.
The best thing we can do is make sure that it doesn't get to that. It doesn't come to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, we will continue this next week. This was, of course,
all right.
Ray, you're great. Thank you so much. Greg, thank you. Lucian Truscott, I think, left, but this has been a mind-boggling call again. With 42 people, we have the longest attention span of any group in the United States. And we will continue this next week. Ray, and Greg, we hope you'll both come back. And thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, Ray, we should talk.
Okay, let's do it.
Get a hold of
I
me
look forward
directly
to it.
through Harvey, okay? Please.
All right,
you guys.
we'll do.
All right, no nukes, everybody. We'll see you next
Thanks, Ray
week.
and Greg.
Oh,
Si se
nukes.
puede.
Thank you,
Good
Steve.
seeing
Thank
you,
you,
Greg.
Wendy, and everybody. No nukes. Wow, that
Good.
was all.
Good.
I'm going to go collapse. Thank you, everybody.
Well, so what I was alluding to is that Andrea raised $340,000 in a couple of hours last night.
Oh, good.
Magical.
Excellent. Well, we'll keep up on that. Thank you so much. We'll have those walk the walk people back. That's a good connection.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
the
good
walk
connection.
people have a couple shekels. Maybe they can get some to Ray.
That is key right now, because if we do not get black and brown voters, the game's out. 7 states.
And they're all going to have to re-register, as Greg has pointed
Very
out.
possibly. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
All right, you guys. We'll see you next.
Later.
Thanks, everybody.